Okay, so Saturday, Terence Crawford defeated Kell Brook by a fourth round TKO. Um, Terence Crawford retains his WBO welterweight championship. Nate, your thoughts?
That was a shorter fight than I kind of pictured. I pictured it going like at least to like a sixth and eighth round, but ended in the fourth. It was really quick. And it also surprised me because I was watching the fight and I realized that there wasn't really a lot going on in the beginning. The first two rounds was kind of quiet. They kind of had each other's number, and then once the third round started, that's when the tide started shifting to Crawford. He was going more for the head. He was using more of them power punches, and eventually it got to Brook and it knocked him out in the fourth round. And it was just really surprising to me that it happened ever so quickly because especially in the first two rounds, if both fighters had their number, you expect that to go long, and it just didn't happen this time around. Overall, it was a pretty solid knockout, very quick one too, if I have to say so myself.
Yeah, I mean, I expected Kell Brook to actually go the distance, and it was like and to me, it was very rare. But something told me he was going to go the distance, but obviously, I was wrong because he knocked him out in the fourth round. But the one thing I did notice was for the first two rounds, Kell Brook, he beat him. I think Kell Brook beat him the first two rounds. He outboxed him, and the one thing I could notice about Terence Crawford was that jab. Kell Brook kept hitting him with that jab.
That's
He kept
one
getting him in.
that's one thing I noticed in the first round too. There was a lot of jabs.
Right. Yeah, Kell Brook kept getting him with that jab, and honestly, Terence Crawford was getting kind of slowed down by it. And it's weird because Terence Crawford, he is a great fighter, and he has incredible knockout power. And so the one thing I did say was when you get Kell Brook on the ropes, it's he crumbles. That's the best way I can say it. He crumbles. When you get him on the ropes, he crumbles. And when Terence Crawford clipped him with that shot, and things with Terence Crawford, he once he knows you're hurt, he's coming after you. There's like no stopping him. And one thing I like to say about Terence Crawford is he keeps his chin out, which is what Kell Brook was doing really well those first two rounds. Getting him on his chin, opening him up a little bit. But then come third, fourth round, Terence Crawford just figured him out. And Terence Crawford has a good chin. Like Terence Crawford, he doesn't have a weak chin. He gets clipped. I said he gets clipped a lot, which he does, but he doesn't have a weak chin. So if you were to go toe to toe, if Kell Brook and Terence Crawford, if they were to go toe to toe, like I said, I think Terence Crawford would have won. And Terence Crawford, the shot in the fourth round that he rocked him with, it wasn't really that big of a shot, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it
Did it hurt?
it,
Did it
it
hurt?
almost it almost looked like when he knocked him out, he barely put any effort into it.
Right. Well, the first one, remember, he got knocked down. He got back up. When he rocked him, it didn't look like a big shot. And then obviously he got knocked down. When he got back up to Kell Brook, though, Terence Crawford just wailed on him. And as soon as I saw Kell Brook on those ropes, I was like, it's over. Because Kell Brook only has two losses, now three. But the two losses with Triple G and Errol Spence were his biggest fights. And those fights he came short. And I knew he was going to come short against Terence Crawford. Now here's what's pretty interesting about this. I saw the post fight interview, and it was Bob Arum and Terence Crawford. And Bob Arum did most of the talking, obviously because he's the promoter. But
I think I seen
Bob,
part of that.
what's up?
I think I seen part of that.
Yeah, They asked him about Spence, and he was saying that Spence is avoiding Crawford, which I don't think is true. I just
Yeah,
think they're
I
just not
that's the
making this
part I
fight
seen.
happen. And then the other thing was they're going for Manny. Terence Crawford is going for Manny Pacquiao. It looks like Bob Arum wants to
Wow.
see that fight, and it'll be a good fight, but it's not the fight I want to see. I mean, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. Manny Pacquiao, what he's doing at 43, 44 years old, it's insane. For especially in a sport like boxing, where that puts some long term damage on you.
yeah, right.
And so, God bless Manny Pacquiao for staying in it and staying in it healthy, and being a successful fighter. So respect to him, but that's not the fight I want to see. I want to see Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. That is a dream fight. And honestly, if we don't get to witness it while they're both in their prime, it's going to be kind of disappointing.
Yeah,
And so
true.
that's honestly what I want to see. Do you have the stats for Crawford and Kell Brook?
Yeah, Crawford's total punches were 36 for 111, which is 32.4%, and Kell Brook's total punches was 26 for 109, which was 23.9% rating. So basically 24%.
Yeah, right. And then in those first 2 rounds, Kell Brook was doing good. I had those first 2 rounds had Kell Brook 2-0. The third round, I was like, you know what, Terence Crawford. I think Terence Crawford won that round. I didn't think it was as lopsided as it was, but I said Terence Crawford won that round, so I was like 2-1. Coming into the fourth, Terence Crawford ate him up. That's what happened. Terence Crawford
Yeah.
ate him up. And the one thing was, if it was a TKO, I didn't expect it to be that early. I thought
Yeah,
it was
right.
Terence Crawford's like round TKO like ranges is usually between like 6 and 8. He usually does it between the 6th and 8th round.
That's
But he
why
did
I
it
was surprised because, like
early.
I said, both fighters had their number. It wasn't until the third round when the favorite started going a little towards Terrence Crawford, which is why I was surprised that it happened that quickly.
Right. And then they asked Kell Brook after the fight, like, where do you rank him when it comes to like Spence and those and Porter? Because remember, Kell Brook did fight Spence and Porter. And
Yeah,
he
right.
said, and the one thing that I was interested in, he gave him credit on some things that he does differently than Spence and Porter. He said, but I can't, he said, like, I really can't rank him above Spence or Porter. It's almost like he ranked them evenly, which is why I'm more tuned into Spence versus Crawford, because it proves, just by what Kell Brook said, in his opinion, I mean, maybe others have different, but in his opinion, because he fought both of them, it's like he's saying they're equally matched. And it's
Yeah,
and it's the one thing that they don't say is like, they don't say that a lot of people think Crawford's better than Spence. That's why Crawford's bet number one pound for pound and Errol Spence is not. But personally, in my opinion, I think they're very equally matched. I really do. Spence is
they
more two different styles, but they're equally matched. Because I think Spence is more defensive, in my opinion. Spence can knock people out, but he's more defensive than Crawford. Difference between Crawford, I think Crawford is more explosive than Spence, and that's the two differences between them. But I do really think they're evenly matched, and that's why I want to see this fight happen.
because this fight's gonna show who's the better fighter.
Absolutely, I wouldn't be surprised if that was pay-per-view. I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised. That is the biggest fight in the welterweight division since, probably, to be honest with you, the only one I could honestly, this is probably the biggest fight in welterweight division since Pacquiao and Mayweather. I'm not saying it's going to get that big because obviously Pacquiao and Mayweather are so much bigger, are almost bigger than their sport itself.
yeah,
Obviously,
right.
Manny Pacquiao and the fan base he has in the Philippines, and Floyd Mayweather and the type of brand that he's been able to build throughout the years. That's why that fight was so important, because there were two household names. But it's not going to be that big. But this is the biggest fight in the welterweight division since that fight, and that is the fight I want to see happen. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about Terence Crawford and Kell Brook. Terence Crawford put up an amazing performance. Kell Brook, he had a good 2, maybe 3 rounds against Terence Crawford, but just wasn't able to get the win. Honestly, I think Kell Brook's gonna have to take a step back, see what's going on, see what he has to do next. Because honestly, I think Kell Brook's hitting. Kell Brook's kind of old, but he's not really that old. Like Terence Crawford's just a year younger. I think Kell Brook is starting to decline on that boxing scale.
Yeah,
He's a good boxer, but I don't think he's at that point where he could challenge for a champion.
yeah, right. I agree.
But best of luck to Kell Brook. Congratulations to Terence Crawford on retaining his belt.
Absolutely.